Hello, everybody. Hello, Amsterdam. Thank you for having me over. I'm Malik. I write a blog called GigaOM. We run a mobile conference called Mobilize, which is about the mobile internet and mobile innovation. And I've been writing about technology for pretty much all my life. So here I am, and I look forward to talking to all of you.
It's a very big honor for you, for us having you here. So thank you very much for that.
It is a big honor for me, seriously.
Okay. Anyway, we crowdsourced a few questions yesterday via Twitter. So we will integrate those in this talk. That's one. Two, we have included some questions of our own. And three, if we have time left, we will answer some questions from the audience in real time. Okay, first of all, are the app stores the new bubble or not?
Absolutely not.
Can you explain why?
I think what we are seeing is a big behavior change in the consumers. We are going from the idea of general purpose computing to task specific computing. If you look at the popularity of things like Kindle, it is basically training people to do or use computers for certain specific tasks, and apps are just part of that, that shift. Now, whether those are the native apps or web apps, that's besides the point, but people will be focusing more and more on these task-specific applications.
Cool, thanks. What about the VC market right now? Can you talk about the key trends that you see?
I think the VC, that's kind of a very general question, so I will try and frame it from the perspective of mobile. I think there will be three major areas where you will see a lot of VC activity. One of the big reasons, one of the big areas of investment will be the mobile core technologies, mobile backhaul, and all those technologies, increasing radio efficiency, spectral efficiencies, because there is a finite quantity, and people need to figure out how to build better infrastructure. So I think that would be one. The other big area of focus for VCs will be tools and services and back-end services which help unify various different platforms, so Android or WebOS or Apple, and figuring out a way to kind of combine whether it's messaging or stuff like that over different platforms. And I think the third most important thing you will see, which we are seeing right now, is the rise of a lot of very early stage investments, and there is a lot of excitement, and mobile is also part of that excitement right now.
Thanks. What about the power in the mobile ecosystem as a whole? If you look at it right now and in the future, which change do you see?
Yeah, so there's a lot of big debate going on between it's the carriers, it's the handset makers, it's the store owners. I kind of believe the real power is still with the consumers. If consumers decide not to buy something, I mean, the phone companies can't really do much, and the Apple can't really do much, and neither can Google, right? So if you're an app developer, your primary focus has to be convincing consumers to buy your product or use your service. And I think that is where the real power is, and over the next few years, it will become even more obvious.
How would you advise the average new startup on their platform channel mix for Android, OS X, or Bada, or something else?
So I really don't know about Bada at all. It just is such a new thing right now. I would say, there is two ways of thinking about your application and the platform you want to focus on. If you want to generate revenues, you have to focus on the iPhone platform. And if you want to base your application largely on advertising, you might want to look at the Android platform, because the Android volumes are obviously going to be much larger in terms of people who will buy Android handsets, or rather, they will be subsidized pretty deeply by the carriers and et cetera. Whereas the iPhone market is might be a little smaller, but people are more likely to pay, and it is a more evolved, app store compared to the Android store just now. And I think so that's one way. I think you can't ignore the OV store just now. I think they may be having some challenges, but eventually they will get it right. It is Nokia after all, and they've had some troubles in the past, and they've always managed to come through. So I am very negative on Nokia, but I'm not writing them off entirely. So it will be your choices will be based on how you want your business to be built. Whether so, if you want to focus entirely on revenue, so you go with the iPhone first. If you want to go advertising, you go with the Android. And in the process, also don't ignore the OV. Everything else is still, everything else is up in the air right now.
But isn't it smart for, as a startup, to focus on new platforms because you have less competition, even though the volume or user base is low at first?
Yeah, logically speaking, that makes a lot of sense. But in the end, you are in the business of building a business. So you really can't say that I'm going to focus on WebOS and build a great app for WebOS and only 1 million handsets get sold. So what happens then, right? So you really don't know.
So what keeps you awake at night?
Ooh, this is really rapid fire question. How about jet
Very
lag?
Personal.
It's like jet lag and several other things which I don't want to talk about.
5 days already,
right? Yeah. I don't know. I think what really keeps me awake at night is the lack of long-term thinking in many things we are doing in the world right now. We, as a society, have become very reactive. We are becoming way too focused on things which are here and now. And so a lot of the mobile app developers are all focused on developing apps for here and now and not thinking about what's going to happen 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, how people's behavior is going to change as more and more these applications and interfaces, the new kind of interfaces like Layer start coming into play. So I think that is one big issue we feel is not being paid attention to on a larger scale.
If you look at distribution, because that's the theme of today, I would like to distribute or promote my app. What can I do besides putting it on app stores? Can you give a few examples?
I don't know, tweet it, use Facebook, and build a community around it. It's really difficult to say what you can do. Is essentially you need to find.
How do you do it for yourself? The iPhone app.
So we always go back to the great rule Kevin Kelly came up with. You need to find 1,000 fanatical users and they will do your work. And I think just finding those 1,000 fanatical users is where your energy should go to, and that's what we do, right? That's how I started my little website and grew it into a big company, at least from my perspective. And I think all app developers have to do exactly the same thing.
Okay, you shared with us the last 2 days a few stats in terms of your iPhone app and your mobile site. Can you share those with us?
Yeah, so
the usage, session time.
Yeah, so interesting fact, we noticed that, so we have 7 different websites and they focus on different areas. Where we have a clean tech website called Earth to Tech, and we have a more mobile device-oriented site called JK on the Run, and we have an online video site called New TV, and productivity site called Web Worker Daily, so on and so forth. But on the app, we decided to build a whole new experience, and the app was inspired by, the design of the app was inspired by a visit to Bruno Cucinelli's store in Manhattan. So I went there, I looked at how they set, like a lot of their latest collection, and how quickly you could browse through it, scan it, and make a buying decision. And so based on that, we decided that this is how our application will look like. So that was the user experience. And then the navigation of it was based on the Cucinelli. And the architecture of it was essentially based on a blackjack table. I don't know. So I looked at various different things. And the idea was that we do so much content, we need to figure out a way to make it easy for people to access, consume, and interact with that content. Yuri helped me with a little bit of thinking behind that app, so thank you, Yuri.
Welcome.
We are close to about 4,000 plus downloads so far, but the most interesting part is not the number of people who've downloaded it, it is the engagement. So the engagement on the app is close to 16 minutes. People spend 16 minutes per user session on the app, which is more than what they spend on our website. So it's clearly a whole new way of looking at content, very different way of thinking about arranging content, interacting with content, and your community.
Can you give a few examples?
In what sense?
On how you stimulate engagement, why it's so unique, and
so, you know, we
why people stay there for 60 minutes instead of just 1 minute on the website.
So I think one of the big reasons is that most of the people are coming and finding various different stories from our 7 different sites in one place. That's the most important thing. The other thing is we've used the notifications pretty effectively. You know, we've integrated our research service into it. We have a Twitter feed in which all the team members from the GigOm family tweet. It's called the GigOm Pulse, which is essentially the links we share about or things we are doing. It's essentially a real-time view into our little news world. That is also into the app, and we talk about our events. So it is a very lively experience. And also, we have created a way for you to just, you don't like something, you can just email us and just let us know that, you know, some stories don't work or some question you have. So it's bringing us closer to our audience. And I think the reason, and it's actually changing how we think about our business. And it's making us think, well, maybe we need to make some bigger changes about our overall business per se. I think in the future, every publishing company will have to start thinking from mobile first and web later. I think that the shift is going to happen much sooner than people realize.
I have a question about Twitter, because you have 1.3 million followers.
2.5.
Yeah, almost 1.3,
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever. Anyway, I can imagine that...
It's okay on Wall Street to have that kind of math, but not in real life.
Good point. Anyway, it's still a lot of value in terms of being a publisher. So my question is, how can you use Twitter in the channel mix if you look at your whole proposition? Did it change over time, or how can you use this?
I mean, Twitter for me has been a way to interact with people more than anything else. And yes, I do share a lot of links from my network, from other people's content. I retweet other people. But it is a way for me to express myself in more real-time basis. But more importantly, it is a way to engage with people who really do want to engage with me. I mean, I can't really answer to every person who, you know, direct messages me, because it becomes a little difficult. But if I have something very important to say, I will find time to deal with people in that.
Good. Question by Erwin Blom, a key visitor of this event, and Twitterer, of course, in Holland. He asks, are the Goallas and Foursquares here to stay, or will the local and social component be part of every service?
I think they will be just part of the whole overall infrastructure. I think there won't be, like in 3 years from now, we won't even think in terms of like a special social networking layer or a special, you know, location-based application. It will be part of every application. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think what you really see right now is a massive explosion in information. It's becoming increasingly difficult to consume information now. And things like social and location are only going to add context. They become even more valuable on a mobile interface because of the relative nature of the screen space, the device and the network strength, the bandwidth availability. So all these things will become part of the infrastructure. And by doing that, the content will become more, you know, I mean, the word I like to use, and I've been talking about this for about 3 years, the next big thing, in my opinion, is serendipity, where things start to come to you in a more, you know, automatic fashion. And I think...
Can you explain this a little bit further?
So
what do you mean serendipity? Information comes to you
right,
at the right moment?
So most of the web right now so far has been architected around the idea of you know, you have to go to a website and pull information, and which was okay, right? For first 10 years, it was okay because there was only so much information. Now we have everybody creating information and everybody consuming information, and that idea of, you know, pull-based, you know, web doesn't make much sense, especially on the mobile, because you can't really do it. Like, the device is so small, the spectrum is finite, the bandwidth is finite. So what you're really going to see is figuring out ways to bring information to you based on your your information. And I think a lot of people,
just like Siri, for example, or
right. So
push notifications.
Good, like, I think
textual.
people didn't really pay that much attention to that acquisition, but that's a good way of going forward. I think Facebook's instant personalization has become, like a bogeyman right now. People don't like it, but essentially we will have to end up at the web, will have to end up there, especially the mobile web. And I think that's, when I say serendipity, the things will just happen, and the machines will have to learn how we use them, especially in context. And I mean, the thing is, like, why should a device, like, let's say your iPhone, behave in a uniform manner, right? Like, let's say if you have a location chip and you are in a church, well, we are in a church, there is a good reason that your phone should automatically go on mute, right? It knows where it is. There is data. I mean, why do we have to go in and say, okay, turn it off, right? Or if you are in office, you can say by checking in, automatically that I am in my office. You have a certain set of applications which show up on your mobile phone, which are more oriented towards your workday. And when you're in a nightclub, the phone changes its personality. And that's what I mean by serendipity. I think the devices will become more intelligent, and we are on our way there. Like, you see, a lot of it is going to happen as more and more phones become more and more powerful. So you see chip companies releasing, multi-core processors, and the chipsets are becoming more intelligent, more visually, powerful, and so all those kind of things. We are going down that route. I don't know when that is going to happen, but it will happen within the next 10 years.
What does it mean for serendipity? Because on the one hand, I believe it will become more important. On the other hand, if you have the Internet of Things, lots of sensors coming along, there's 7, it will be introduced. That means the web might be more functional relative to serendipity, because you have more data that is functionally based, that might be relevant
so
to your context.
If your phone can see, if your phone can hear, if your phone can sense, and if your phone can feel where it is, why can't it make decisions for content based on those senses? I think it's just like human beings make decisions based on various, senses we have. I mean, the only sense it won't have is probably the sense of smell and sense of taste. I mean, who cares, right? But eventually those sensors are going to be used to build information. I think the biggest thing I would say people have to think differently is not think about the past, right? I like all these people who are creating the mobile apps and mobile, don't think about the world from the past, in a sense, from the browser's perspective of like last 10 years. You have to think about the future in a very different way, because the complexity of the world tomorrow is much higher than what it was last year or even yesterday, right? So every time somebody buys an iPhone and takes a photograph and shares that photograph, they're essentially creating more pollution on the web. So we have to think of things in a more different, intelligent sort of a way. So we can't think of the mobile web or the internet per se in yesterday's terms. We have to think it in terms of tomorrow. What could be the problem? So thinking long-term about things a little bit.
Agree. What is your personal view on augmented reality?
I think companies like Layer are pretty awesome, and hopefully, we'll see it adopted more widely. So far it's pretty early days on that. But it's, 4 years ago, it was very early days for Twitter also. So 4 years, the world changes very fast these days. So.
Okay, what about the battle between Apple and Google? We talked about that extensively. Can you share your vision on this battle?
It's a battle. I think it's an interesting battle, right? There's two different ideologies there, and
ad focus or revenue focus.
Well, I explained to you, there's you make a choice based on what you want to do. And I think there is a slightly different way of thinking about it. People think of it as closed versus open. Well, that's one way of thinking about it. Also thinking about the fact that Apple is the only device on the iPhone OS, which comes out into the market. So it's a little bit of a device versus platform ideology. How do I don't really care. I use BlackBerry, so I mean, I like both. Like I like, I like Android and I like Apple, and I hope they all do well because they're basically changing one thing. They're putting power in the hand of the consumer. That's the most important thing. They're not having some phone company deciding that these are the 10 apps you can use on a handset. And I think that is the big lesson we need to take.
Okay, thanks, Oom. Do we have time for some questions in the audience? Okay, great. 5 minutes. Anyone?
Sure, okay. Let's start at this side. We have another mic, so...
Thank you. Hi, Oom. Thank you for your rapid-fire answers to Van Geest. Are you familiar, first of all, with the term informatics? Is that an English term?
Yeah.
For computer science?
Yeah.
Last time when we were here, there was this great presentation on DNA developments, DNA engineering. And I asked the question to both these presenters, is life analog or digital? And they both answered, it's digital. So I was thinking since then, could there be an informatics of life? And could this maybe be some kind of a big threshold that we're crossing now, that we're starting to understand the informatics of life, and that this is where the big shift to serendipity could come from?
I think there is no big shift. It will be a constant evolution. Like over every few months, every few years, we will see more and more serendipity around us, and what you call informatics of this, the data will become pretty pervasive, and digital will augment real life, right? Like it will, because we are entering a whole different, phase of human life. I think there's a lot of, we can probably offline talk about bioinformatics and how that's changing everything and how personalized medicine. And so this is the big shift, the big data, the coming data tsunami is going to change everything. You can call it informatics or you want to call it whatever. It's essentially the same idea, and it's going to start to impact everything we do. We can talk offline. This is not like a rapid fire answer, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, Om. My name is Patrick from Vodafone. Question I have, if you think about startups, do you see entry points in the world of mobile other than through app stores, delivering web services or web apps? Can people enter at the SIM level, in the hardware level, in the network level, and not having to be a $1 billion company?
Oh, that's a tough one to answer. If you're a startup, you really don't think in terms of where you're entering. You're just mad enough to enter take your idea and go and build it. Sometimes you have to go through an app store, and I think the big opportunities are still in the infrastructure level. People have to think differently about software layer, about the network layer, about the semiconductor opportunities of doing fundamental innovations. I think just focusing too much on the front end is great, but in the end, I don't know if you remember during the 90s and the early 2000s, the companies which made the most money were not the guys who were building front end stuff, but it was the guys who built the back end stuff. All the big acquisitions and big IPOs were all companies which did the back end stuff. Sienna is still around. The guys like Infinera are still around, and Netscape, does anybody remember where they are? It's like the front-end company. So you have to think differently about it.
So here's a question.
Yeah, hi, Vincent Everts. We also marry Meeker. In 2014, the mobile web will be bigger than the desktop web. Can you think of that a little bit further? How much that will be bigger in numbers? Will it always be bigger in hours? Will it be bigger in a monetary sense? How is that statement, the mobile web will be bigger in 2014, really, not rapid fire, but some more intelligence of which we're used to in your blog?
Well, yeah, so it's a little hard to do in 5 seconds, but yes, and yes. I spent a lot of time with Mary on that presentation, and yes, it will be bigger. Yes, it will be much larger. Think about it this way. When you have 1 billion devices, right, connected to the net versus 400 million PCs, things will be very different. But the thing is, why limit yourself to 1 billion devices? There is going to be more than that. There are going to be tens of billions of connected devices, not just mobile computers in our pocket, whether you call them digital frames or tablets or whatever you want to call them, even your refrigerator or whatever. The connectivity is going to be much, much, much bigger. And I think those are the big opportunities. I think we are limiting the discourse by focusing entirely on the iPhone or the Android phones, right? It is much bigger. The device you're using in your hand, it will have a much bigger impact than a lot of other things, right? Or the digital frames, right? I think those are simple things. I don't think there will be any consumer device which won't be connected in the future anymore, right? And I think that's the key thing. And we need to really think about the mobile internet differently, and it's going to be much bigger. And yes, 2014, I think it'll be much faster than that. I think the biggest problem, you want proof of that, is that more and more phone companies are backing away from flat rate plans. I think that's a sign that the mobile web is growing much faster than anybody expected, right? I mean, the idea, think about this. So first time you got a mobile phone, I think the first time I used a mobile phone, and I said, you know what, I will never think of the phone companies in the same way, because for me, the static phone line at that point was dead, right? Today, it's very common to just stand and make phone calls anywhere, anytime. It's like I get a call from my mother in Amsterdam, and where she's somewhere else. And like in 3 different time zones, the call is flying through. Nobody knows where we are, but we're still talking. And I think that's a big change. And same is the impact you're going to see on computing, right? Computing just went from your desktop to wherever you are, right? So you don't really care. And I think that's a big, big shift. So I think you should expect some more fun times going forward.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very, very, very much, Oom, for answering these questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, welcome. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.